I came home early because the city smelled like rain and because I wanted to. There is a certain small act of rebellion in returning before anyone expects you, in making your own footsteps beat the rhythm of the house rather than matching the tempo of someone else's schedule. Thomas Sterling is a man who had learned long ago how to enjoy the trivial rebellions. A second cup of coffee at midnight, an extra hour in the study reading a book someone else thought was too dull, arriving home 15 minutes before the appointed time just to see how empty the rooms looked when they weren't performing. The December sky had been a hard pewter all afternoon, and traffic downtown moved like a wet ribbon. My office was quieter than usual. Clients were closing out before the holidays, and I had wrapped the important parts of my day into neat folders and left them there. I told myself I was coming home early because I liked the silence of the house after a rain. The truth was thinner and sharper. After 3 years of patient suspicion, I wanted to hear their words again. I wanted the evidence to be fresh in air and voice, not a rumor melted and reformed in my head. I stood for a second on the porch under the awning, the December rain making small holes in the last of the leaves clinging to the maples. The key in my hand felt like the right shape in my palm, and for a moment, the smallest of moments, I allowed myself a private, ridiculous pleasure. The thought that this house had been mine for decades, that the boards themselves still remembered Sarah's laugh, and the way she shuffled through the kitchen, humming old songs. They had seen births and losses and slow afternoons of crossword puzzles. They had not yet seen betrayal, not until the last 3 years. When I opened the door, I took care, because habit is a merciful thing. There are sounds that tell you everything if you listen. The soft clack of a laptop closing, the quick movements of someone trying to appear casual, the tiny hollow echo of a glass touched too strongly against the table. The hallway smelled faintly of lemon polish and the particular warm grease of Jennifer's cooking. My hand was still on the doorknob when I heard their voices. Two voices, easy and careless, spilling words into the living room like a thoughtless offering to the fire. "We've waited 3 years already," Jennifer said. Her voice, which in other moments could still make my chest contract with something like pride, sounded casual. There was a crispness to it I had not heard in her tone since she moved back with them. "How much longer are we supposed to pretend?" That was David. He had that smooth, practiced cadence he used when he was explaining market trends or telling someone why their idea couldn't possibly succeed. His voice had a smugness now, the way graphite has a sheen before you scrub it away. I should have turned and tapped him on the shoulder, announced myself. Walked in and played the role I'd been playing for 3 years. The devoted father, the long-suffering elder who needed patience, who would smile, who would act oblivious and trustful. Instead, I stayed where I was, arm resting on the door, listening. There is a luxury in listening. It costs nothing, but it offers everything. The house itself seemed to hold its breath, as though it knew the future would tilt on whatever I heard next. "We deserve to be here," David went on. 3 years of keeping him company, running his errands, being patient with his quirks. That's worth something. Jennifer's laugh, the soft, bright laugh of a woman comfortable with her own sense of entitlement, floated into the hallway. "Damn right we have. It's not selfish. It's practical. People who are kind rarely get the house. People who are clever like us, we plan." My chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with air. It was a squeezing, a focused pressure under the ribs that felt like the first chord of an old song you thought you'd forgotten. My hand tightened on the key. They were careful, but not careful enough. I stepped inside as if I had been planning to all along. The foyer light threw a warm circle on the rug. Jennifer, caught mid-giggle, started at the sight of me and smoothed her face into a smile as quickly as one might cast a mask over a sudden blush. "Oh, Dad, we didn't hear you come in," she said, the practiced cadence of a stage whisper. I set my briefcase down. The leather thudded on the table with a soft, deliberate sound. "Traffic was a mess," I said. I decided to come home. They exchanged a glance that had the same quickness of two people reading the same small private script. David closed the laptop with a soft click. The screen was angled away from me, as if that would disguise it from me. But the reflection caught in the antique mirror that Sarah had loved. In that reflection, angled in a way that almost wanted to reveal itself, I saw numbers slide across a spreadsheet, columns of currency and dates, home equity line of credit, power of attorney, property valuation, Portland, Oregon. Figures that might have been employed for innocent calculations if only the pattern had not emerged like a stain under a white shirt. We talked about nothing for a while. The whole performance of normalcy, the mundane minutiae of a house where everyone is pretending everything is fine, is a thing of motionless artistry. Jennifer asked about my day in that soft, prying way she used to use when she wanted something. I told her about a meeting, about a client who wanted to restructure a portfolio. I drank water I did not want. The house hummed with the small noises of living, the clock by the mantel, the soft creak of the third floorboard when someone shifted. It was the third floorboard, the one that complained if you stepped wrong, that had saved me a dozen times when she was a teenager sneaking back in after curfew. I had memorized which ones groaned and which held firm. By the time dinner arrived at 7, the conversation had become a gentle, brittle thing. Jennifer moved food around her plate with exaggerated care. David's eyes kept flicking to his laptop, then away, like a man who is trying to hide a secret from even himself. So, Jennifer said, pausing with the pearl necklace I gave her, an old thing I'd hoped would ground her a bit, between two fingers. David's parents are coming on Friday. Linda has back problems. The guest room might not be ideal. I answered with the sort of politeness that felt like the smoothing of fabric over a stain. The guest room is yours, of course. She laughed. It was a small sound, but it carried a blow. It would just be easier, she said lightly, if Dad stayed in the back room for a while. It's only for the week. We'll buy a new mattress for you, special delivery. You know how Linda is, very particular about her back. Something in her tone was performative charity, an offered kindness that had a bill tucked tightly into the gesture. David's expression did not change, but the way his mouth flattened gave the same satisfaction a cartographer must feel when he traces the edge of a claim. I set down my fork. The metal rang softly. We'll discuss it later, I said, because saying any more would have been admitting that I'd heard them. That would have been losing the advantage of the silence I'd carried in. They excused themselves early that night, citing emails and the need to check a spreadsheet. Jennifer kissed my cheek with the plodding affection of a person who believes warmth can be rationed at will. I watched them go down the hallway, then close the door to their bedroom. Behind that door, the sounds of marital complicity, soft words, the rustle of sheets, the small crinkle of an agreement made in the dark, started and then faded. I waited. 3 years is a long enough arc for patterns to be visible. The first year had been small things, a misplaced check, a forgotten reimbursement, Jennifer's credit card balances that I covered because I thought I was helping my child get back on her feet. The second year saw the creeping of excuses, work, and investment opportunities, and we'll pay you back. By the third year, my instinct had hardened into suspicion because the glow of excuses had dulled into a clear pattern, repeated withdrawals that matched payments to accounts I did not recognize, loans for things she told me she didn't need, and an insistence on convenience framed as concern. When I moved to the study, I locked the door. The key in the drawer was a ritual I kept from the years when client files were everything, and trust had to be embedded in a steel lock. Now I needed that small, stubborn privacy for a different reason. I took the small key from its place, inserted it into the drawer, and opened it as if I were just settling at my desk. The accordion folder lay exactly where I'd left it, neat, labeled, tactile proof against the noise of denials. I spread the contents across the mahogany surface like a man dealing cards he intends to win with. Bank statements, credit card slips, a ledger I had kept for years because the accountant in me still loved ordered lists, expense receipts with Jennifer's name handwritten next to them, but the account numbers, the way they fed into different nodes of an unfamiliar network, told me something else. There were loans, the small ones at first, like $3,000 here, $5,000 there, and then a single larger entry that arrested my attention, $32,000, for a BMW, allegedly, signed 2 years ago to be repaid within 12 months. The deadline had passed 18 months ago. The pattern was the same as a disease. It starts small, becomes systemic, and then shows itself in the organs of things you thought healthy. I cross-referenced dates, made notes in the margin. My hand moved with the precise economy of someone who had spent a life making sure numbers could be trusted. There was the charge to an interior decorator in November, a purchase of luxury linens in March, multiple cash advances that should have set off alarms. There were entries, an $850,000 evaluation filed for a home equity line of credit, not on my name but shaded in the pale ink of intent. There were signatures that looked like mine but with little discrepancies. A letter looped a fraction more, the tail of a T shorter. It's astonishing how quickly forged writing gives itself away to someone who's spent a lifetime noticing such things. It might have fooled an unaided eye. It would not have fooled me. I sat back in the chair and let the light from my desk lamp make a small pool on the papers. They were ordinary pieces of evidence, inexplosive in their ordinariness. They showed a plan, executed not clumsily, but with the patient determination of two people who had decided the house was theirs by right. There has been a peculiar cruelty in their generosity. They had stayed for 3 years ostensibly to keep me company, to be helpful, to make sure I was not lonely. In exchange, they had absorbed my bills, or rather, they had shifted my obligations so they looked like acts of care. A refrigerator service here, a new roof quote there. Each item was a thread in a net. I had paid them in small, compounding ways. The signature on a document here, a notarized paper there, a driver's license scanned and stored. Each seemingly insignificant act became a stair in the architecture of takeover. The study clock ticked. It is an old habit to mark the evening with the cadence of a timekeeper when your life has been organized around meetings and schedules. I felt each tick like the footfall of a neighbor crossing the hallway. The rage that might have come in a younger man, sharp and loud and unmistakable, was smoldering in me now rather than flaring. There was clarity, not cacophony. Anger, if used correctly, is a tool. Left wild, it is merely noise. I made a decision that night. It was not grand or dramatic. No burning of photographs, no immediate reveal at the dinner table. Those are the things the cameras love, the things that let people say, "I saw him lose control." I have never been a man of spectacle. My revenge, if that is what it would come to, would be grounded in the slow and careful accumulation of facts. The same skill that had helped me keep track of ledgers and fiduciary responsibilities would serve now. Phase 1, I thought, as I slid each paper back into the accordion folder. Listen, understand, gather. Do not let them know they have been heard until the evidence can be stacked like coins, all of the same weight and stamped and impossible to deny. Outside, the rain had turned into a steady gray. The house seemed cozier, or perhaps the coziness was the armor of a man who had decided to stop pretending. I made a list on an index card. Banks to call, dates to verify, signatures to compare, people who might help. There were old friends in legal aid and one retired inspector at the county office who owed me small favors. A principle, perhaps, that still meant something. When I finally went to bed, the house felt like something borrowed rather than owned. The portraits in the hall watched like spectators. The furniture settled into its places, and Sarah's clock continued to keep time as if we had not all been altered by the negotiations of years. Sleep that night was fragmented. I woke up at odd hours to the small commerce of memory, the smell of Sarah's soup when she was making it, the way she would hum when she ironed a shirt, the sharp taste of a glass of wine we shared quietly long before children and complications arrived. In the morning, I found myself moving through the house differently. I watched Jennifer from a distance that morning at breakfast, the way she buttered toast, the practiced, small motions of someone used to being served. David read something on his tablet and scrolled with the half-attention of someone who is always calculating. They were ordinary. Their ordinariness was what made them dangerous. They had learned to make every day feel like the safety of the world, so that the wound of their intentions would not cause alarm until it was too late. I ordered my coffee black. I did small errands as if I were doing the usual things of a man my age. The hardware store for light bulbs, the grocer for almond milk. None of it was unusual, and that was the point. I wanted my movements to be predictable. I wanted them to continue to speak as if they were entitled to the house until the words revealed their own duplicity. There is a peculiar moral arithmetic to the moment when you realize someone you loved has been tallying you in their ledger as a asset rather than a person. It is less about the money and more about the theft of the story you imagined you shared. The idea that care can be exchanged for loyalty, that proximity bestows entitlement. I felt the loss of that story as a dull, persistent ache. I am not a violent man. My satisfaction when it comes does not come from seeing a loved one reduced to shame for the spectacle of it. It will be quieter than that. It will be the satisfying click of a mechanical lock sliding into place. It will be the slow, cruel justice of numbers balancing and of documents returning to the order they deserve. That afternoon, I rang an old number I hadn't used in years. A man named Harris, who spent 30 years in the fraud division and had a coffee-stained map of the city in his memory. He answered on the second ring, his voice a dry surprise. "Harris, it's Tom." "Tommy," he said, decades collapsing into a single syllable. "You sound like you found a reason to call." "I did," I said. "I think there's a pattern here. I need someone who can look at documents and tell me if signatures hold water." There was a pause, the sound of paper being shuffled on his end. "You've always been patient, Tom. Maybe a little too patient." His tone was not unkind. "Bring the papers by." "Lunch?" I agreed, and it was a small victory, not dramatic, not final, but it was the movement of a piece on the board. When I hung up, I sat with the folder one more time, feeling the weight of it beneath my palm. The house around me was gently asleep. The maples were bare now, the weather shifting to a wind that would push the rain onward. Outside, the world would not notice our small domestic catastrophes. It would go on, indifferent and big. Inside, the life I had believed we shared had shrunk to a series of transactions I had been covering with the kindness of a father. That night, no, that week, would be the place where the balance became clear. I do not want to give the wrong impression. I do not consider myself a noble sentinel. There are judgments I have made in private that I would not offer to a jury. I recognize in myself the hunger to be respected, to keep what was built with me in it. But respect is a currency that must be earned, not assumed. And I had loved a woman who had not shown the backbone to resist the easy arithmetic of greed. In the silence before sleep, I repeated the phrase to myself like a benediction and a warning. Phase 1 complete. I had listened. I had learned. Now the quiet work would begin. The days between the eavesdrop and Christmas stretched like a taut wire, shimmering, quiet, and dangerous. I went about my routines as if nothing had changed. Coffee at 6, the newspaper folded neatly by the window. A slow walk through the backyard that Sarah had once filled with lilacs and bird feeders. Outwardly, I was still the polite, slightly absent-minded old man my daughter believed she could manipulate. Inside, every breath was deliberate, every glance calculated. The difference between revenge and justice is timing, and I was counting hours. On the morning of December 22nd, I heard Jennifer humming as she moved about the kitchen, a Christmas song, "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas." The irony stung. She decorated the living room that week, filling it with garish red and gold ornaments she'd ordered online. I hadn't said a word when she replaced Sarah's white porcelain angels with cheap glittered reindeer. I watched as she arranged them on the mantel, acting as though the home had always been hers. David was sitting in my armchair when I walked in, laptop perched on his knees. He didn't stand up, just gave me a polite, dismissive nod. "Morning, Tom," he said, using my first name again. That small gesture told me everything. The slow erosion of respect was complete. I nodded back, poured my coffee, and sat across from him. "Getting ready for the holidays?" I asked. "Trying to finish some paperwork before the year ends." His tone was light, but his eyes were elsewhere, flicking to the corner of the screen where numbers danced across a spreadsheet. Jennifer came in, smiling too brightly. "Dad, I was thinking we should make Christmas really special this year. It's been such a challenging time." I looked up. Challenging? You know, with everything. Finances, the market, your situation. She trailed off, clearly realizing too late that she'd said too much. "My situation?" I asked, setting the cup down gently. She fidgeted, adjusting the sleeve of her cashmere sweater. I just meant, you've been working so hard for so long. Maybe it's time to relax. Let others take care of things. I smiled, soft and calm. That's very thoughtful of you. Her relief was visible. She thought she had redirected the conversation. She didn't notice the way I was studying her, memorizing every twitch, every tone. When someone is planning a betrayal, their guilt leaks out in small, nervous gestures. Jennifer was leaking guilt like a cracked faucet. That evening, I made a call to my lawyer, Mr. Latham, an old friend from the days when I was still managing portfolios for wealthy clients. We hadn't spoken in nearly a year, but his voice carried the same patient steadiness I remembered. Tom, you're calling late. Everything all right? Just tying up some end-of-year matters, I said. I need to make sure my property and financial documents are up to date. Could you check if any requests have been made regarding a home equity line or power of attorney? There was a pause, the sound of pages flipping. Not from you, no. Why? Just making sure. If you receive any such request, I want you to call me directly. No one else has authority to act on my behalf. Not Jennifer, not David. He hesitated. Should I be worried, Tom? Not yet, I said, but keep your eyes open. I hung up and stared at the phone for a long while. I had not yet told him the full truth, that my daughter and her husband were planning to strip me of everything I had built. I wanted to handle the early stages myself. My training as an accountant had given me a particular pleasure in watching dishonest math collapse. 2 days before Christmas, Jennifer informed me of her big plan. Dad, she said sweetly over dinner, David's parents are coming a bit earlier than expected. Tomorrow, actually. I just thought we should make them comfortable. They're older, and you know how Linda's back gives her trouble. The guest room mattress isn't ideal. I looked at her, expressionless. I'll have a new mattress delivered first thing in the morning. She laughed nervously. Oh no, Dad, it's not about the mattress. It's more that the guest room doesn't have much space. And your room, well, it's on the first floor, easy access to the bathroom and the kitchen. It's perfect for them. So you'd like me to move out of my bedroom for the week? Just for a few days. You can take the study or the small back room. David, who'd been quiet until then, looked up with a smirk. You'll still be here, of course, just in a different room. It was the tone that did it, the mixture of mockery and ownership, like he was already measuring the space in his mind, imagining where his parents' luggage would go. I took a sip of water, keeping my voice calm. That won't be necessary. Jennifer blinked, caught off guard. What do you mean? I mean this house has 3 bedrooms, one of which is mine. Guests stay in the guest room. Always have. Her lips tightened. Dad, why do you have to make things difficult? Because I've already made things too easy. David set his fork down, his patience cracking. Tom, it's just a room. Don't make this a big deal. I turned my eyes on him, slow, deliberate. It's not the room I'm protecting, David. It's the principle. The air between us went cold. Jennifer stared at me like she didn't recognize the man in front of her. For a moment, I saw a flash of something real in her face. Fear, maybe. The kind a child feels when a parent stops playing the game. Dinner ended in silence. The next day was Christmas Eve. Snow hadn't come yet, only rain and wind sweeping through the valley. The house smelled of roasted turkey and pine-scented candles. Jennifer had dressed up in red silk, David in a navy sweater that probably cost more than the car I bought him years ago. I wore a plain gray suit, the same one I'd worn to Sarah's funeral. The Sterling home had always hosted Christmas dinners filled with laughter, candlelight, and Sarah's soft voice telling stories. Between courses, now the air felt different, tighter, almost brittle. Linda and Robert, David's parents, arrived around 6. They were polite, the kind of people who smiled too much when they wanted something. Linda looked me up and down with thinly veiled disdain. Oh, you must be Thomas. What a lovely home you have. Thank you, I said, shaking her hand. I built it with my wife many years ago. Of course, she replied, though Jennifer's really given it new life, hasn't she? That sentence was not a compliment. It was a territorial claim. Dinner began stiffly. Jennifer chattered about her online business, about how family is what really matters. David poured wine like he was baptizing himself in arrogance. I kept my smile fixed, my tone light. When the main course arrived, Linda complained about the seating arrangement. "Oh, I can't sit here," she said, pointing at the end of the table. "It's too far from the fireplace. My back will lock up." Jennifer looked at me apologetically. "Dad, maybe you could switch with her?" "I'm fine where I am," I said. David's jaw tightened. He took a long sip of wine. "Tom, it's Christmas. Don't be petty." "Petty?" I repeated softly. He slammed his glass down, red wine splashing across the tablecloth. "Yes, petty. You think you can control everything just because you're old and rich? Maybe it's time someone else took charge of this place." Jennifer's face flushed. "David," but he was too far gone. "You think this house belongs to you forever? You're wasting it. We live here, we take care of you, and you act like we're intruders." The room went silent. I could hear the fire crackling behind him, the wind outside. Slowly I stood. "David," I said quietly, "you've forgotten something important." He sneered. "What's that?" "That generosity isn't a transaction, and this house doesn't belong to thieves." His face turned red. Before Jennifer could stop him, he grabbed his glass and flung the rest of the wine in my face. Gasps, Linda screamed. Jennifer stood frozen. The wine stung my eyes, but I didn't move. I simply took a napkin, dabbed at my face, and looked at him. Calm, almost pitying. "Feel better?" I asked. David's breathing was ragged. He didn't answer. Then I turned to Jennifer. "You, my daughter, have something to say?" Her lip trembled. "Don't call me that," she said. "Not anymore." For a long moment, I simply stared at her. Then I smiled, slow, deliberate, the way a chess player smiles when his opponent takes the bait. "I see," I said softly. "Phase 1 complete." David frowned. "What the hell does that mean?" But I was already walking toward the door. I picked up my coat, took my phone from my pocket, and dialed a number. "Detective Harris," came the voice on the other end. "It's Thomas Sterling," I said calmly. "You might want to send a car. I believe you'll find some very interesting documents waiting for you at my attorney's office tomorrow morning." The room behind me erupted. Jennifer shouting, David demanding explanations, Linda asking what was happening. I opened the door and let the cold December air flood in. The smell of rain mixed with pine and candle smoke. I looked back once, meeting Jennifer's eyes. "Merry Christmas," I said quietly. "It'll be your last one here." Then I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. The rain had stopped. The world was silent. I stood there for a full minute, letting the cold sting my face, feeling more alive than I had in years. In the distance, I could already hear the faint wail of sirens. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window of the small guest room, not because they had taken my bedroom, but because I wanted to watch, to listen, to wait. Phase 1 was complete. Phase 2, exposure, would begin at dawn. And for the first time since Sarah's death, I felt something I had not felt in years. Not anger, not grief. Purpose. The kind that makes a man dangerous again. Snow had begun to fall the morning of Christmas Eve. Soft, hesitant flakes that looked almost too gentle for what was coming. From my upstairs window, I could see the world below blanketed in deceptive peace. The West Hills had always looked beautiful in winter. That's why Sarah and I bought this house 30 years ago. She loved how the light hit the fir trees, how the snow turned everything quiet. But this Christmas, silence had a different weight. Jennifer was downstairs humming carols. I recognized the tune, Silent Night, her mother's favorite. I could almost believe she was doing it in memory of Sarah, but the hurried way she skipped certain verses told me it wasn't about sentiment. It was to drown out guilt. David, on the other hand, was pacing. Through the staircase railing, I saw him on the phone near the fireplace, whispering sharply into his Bluetooth headset. "Yes, after the holiday," he said. "Once he's settled elsewhere, the paperwork moves fast." Settled elsewhere. He meant me. I adjusted the cuff of my sweater and watched the flames dance in the hearth below. They had no idea I'd installed a security system last week. Audio recorders discreetly hidden behind paintings and vents. Cameras concealed within antique frames. Old men aren't always foolish. Sometimes we simply let the young believe we are. By noon, the house smelled of roast duck and rosemary. Jennifer prided herself on hosting elegant dinners. She'd invited a few neighbors for warmth and cheer. Her words, not mine. In truth, it was about image, showing the world she was dutifully caring for her aging father. The kind daughter, self-sacrificing and patient. I almost admired her ability to perform. When the doorbell rang, I expected her in-laws, but when I opened it, there stood Officer Malone and Detective Harris, Portland PD. Their visit was right on time. "Mr. Sterling?" Malone asked. "Yes," I said, feigning mild surprise. "We're responding to a call from you earlier this week regarding suspected financial misconduct." I nodded, lowering my voice. "Please, follow my lead." Jennifer appeared behind me, smiling. "Oh, officers, Merry Christmas. Is everything all right?" "Routine check," I replied smoothly before they could answer. "These gentlemen just wanted to confirm some identity details related to estate matters." She blinked. "Estate?" I smiled faintly. "You'll understand in a moment." David emerged from the kitchen, wineglass in hand. "Hey, what's this? Some kind of inspection?" "Something like that," I said. The officers stepped inside, their presence turning the festive air brittle. Jennifer's gaze flicked between us, her cheer faltering. "Dad, I wish you'd told me. I didn't want to worry you, dear." As we gathered around the dining table, the tension thickened. Malone handed me a document. "This is the confirmation you requested. The ownership transfer and account logs you submitted were verified. The fraudulent authorizations were traced to these two individuals." He placed a folder on the table. Jennifer's face drained of color. David set down his glass too quickly. Red wine sloshed over the rim, streaking the white tablecloth like blood. "What is this?" Jennifer whispered. "Proof," I said. 3 years' worth. You accessed my line of credit without authorization, used my accounts to refinance this property under your name, and forged my digital signature." David laughed weakly. "Come on, Frank. You're misunderstanding something." "Really?" I turned to the officers. "Detective, could you read the statement aloud?" Harris unfolded a page. "Statement recorded December 18th. Subject, David Shaw, applied for a property equity withdrawal citing power of attorney. An authority document digitally signed by Frank Sterling. The signature was confirmed as forged." Jennifer's fork slipped from her hand. It hit the plate with a ringing clatter. "I did it for us," she blurted. "For the family. You weren't doing anything with the money." "I was saving it for your children," I said evenly. "For their college. For your future. Not your greed." Her eyes filled with tears that weren't regret. They were fear. You can't just call the police on us." "Oh, I didn't," I replied softly. "They've been aware for a week. I only asked them to come today for timing." David stood abruptly, the chair scraping. "You vindictive old man." "Careful," Malone warned. "You're both under investigation." "Sit down." Jennifer grabbed his arm. "David, stop." The room was silent except for the faint hiss of the fireplace. The clock on the mantel ticked like a metronome, marking the rhythm of their unraveling. Then came the final touch. I reached into my coat pocket and placed a USB drive on the table. "What's that?" Jennifer asked. "A copy of the audio recordings from this house. Every conversation since last month, including the one where you discussed how long you'd have to pretend before selling my home." David's mouth opened, then closed again. His face turned red. "You bugged us?" Jennifer's voice cracked. "I safeguarded what was mine." I looked toward the officers. "I believe this will be sufficient evidence for your records." Malone nodded. "It is. We'll process it." But I wasn't done. Not yet. As the officers began their formal reading of rights, I stood. My hand trembled slightly, but not from weakness, from the sheer weight of holding back years of hurt. "Jennifer," I said quietly, "when your mother died, I promised her I'd protect you. I never imagined I'd have to protect myself from you." Tears rolled down her cheeks now, but I saw no repentance, only desperation. "Please, Dad, don't do this. You're ruining everything." "No," I said. "You ruined everything when you stopped being my daughter and became my enemy." David tried to step forward, but Malone's hand shot out. "That's enough, sir." They were escorted outside minutes later. Red and blue lights painted the snow. Neighbors peeked through curtains, whispering. Jennifer turned once at the doorway, her face pale and pleading. I couldn't bring myself to look away. Not out of sympathy, but out of mourning. The kind that comes when something dies and you realize it's been dead far longer than you knew. When the door finally closed, the silence returned. The fire crackled softly, and for the first time in years, I felt warmth that wasn't a lie. I sat down at the table, poured myself a glass of untouched wine, and raised it toward Sarah's portrait above the mantel. Merry Christmas, my love. Phase 2 complete. But as the night deepened and the lights from the police cars faded into the hills, I knew something was still missing. Revenge was satisfying, yes. But justice had layers. The next phase wouldn't involve police. It would involve legacy. Tomorrow I would rewrite my will. Jennifer and David would not inherit a cent. Instead, the house, our house, would become something better. A scholarship foundation in Sarah's name, offering shelter and education to families who truly needed it. I leaned back in my chair, listening to the snow whisper against the window panes. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't angry. I was free. Outside, the flakes grew heavier, covering every footprint that led away from my home, erasing the past in white silence. And upstairs, in the study, the red light of a still recording camera blinked once more, ensuring every truth remained documented. Phase 3 had already begun. The house felt impossibly still after the patrol cars left. Outside, the snow muffled everything. Tire tracks, voices, the echoes of accusation. Inside, only the clock ticked. Each second sounded like a reminder that my world had shifted and would never return to what it once was. For a while, I sat in the darkened living room, staring at the half-emptied wine glass in front of me. It reflected the flicker of the dying fire, red like blood under candlelight. My daughter's laughter used to fill this house every December. Now her last words, "Don't call me your father anymore," echoed in my head like a curse. But regret had no place tonight. I rose and walked slowly through the hall. Every photograph on the wall was a story. Jennifer's first piano recital, her college graduation, her wedding to David. All those years, I believed love was protection, that giving endlessly would keep me close to her. Instead, generosity had made me invisible, easy to exploit. In my study, the folder of evidence still lay open. I placed each document back inside carefully, almost tenderly, and sealed it. Tomorrow it would go to my attorney, along with the revised will. Sarah's foundation was already taking shape in my mind. The Sterling Hope Trust, education, housing, dignity, the things my own child had forgotten. At midnight, the phone rang. I hesitated before answering. "Dad?" Jennifer's voice was small, trembling. "They let us go home for the night. David's furious, but I wanted to say," her breath hitched, "I didn't mean for it to go this far." I closed my eyes. "Yes, you did," I said quietly. "You meant it every time you planned to sell my house behind my back. You meant it every time you smiled and lied to my face." "I was scared," she whispered. "We had debts. I thought if we owned this place, you'd be safe," I finished for her. "And I'd be gone." Silence stretched between us. Outside, wind rattled the window panes. "Please," she said finally, "I don't want to lose you." "You already did," I replied, "but I hope one day you understand why." I ended the call before she could speak again. My hands shook, not from anger this time, but release. There's a strange peace that comes with losing everything you thought mattered. It makes room for what truly does. I walked upstairs to the master bedroom, the one Sarah and I had shared. I hadn't slept there since she passed. Tonight I turned the knob, stepped inside, and was met by the faint scent of lavender still clinging to the drapes. I sat on the edge of the bed and whispered into the empty room. "It's done, Sarah. They won't hurt me anymore." The words didn't feel like victory. They felt like closure. When morning came, sunlight filtered through the snow-covered glass, painting soft gold across the hardwood floor. I brewed coffee, fed the old golden retriever that still followed me everywhere, and watched the city below wake beneath the frost. Across the street, neighbors shoveled their driveways, pretending not to look toward my house, the one that had hosted sirens and shouting the night before. Let them gossip. Let them wonder. For the first time in years, I didn't care what anyone thought. Justice, I realized, wasn't loud. It was quiet. It was sitting in your own kitchen, safe, knowing you no longer owed anyone an explanation. I poured a second cup of coffee and smiled faintly at Sarah's portrait. Phase 3, I murmured. Rebuild. And outside, beneath the pale morning sun, the snow began to melt, revealing at last solid ground. Winter loosened its grip over the next few weeks, but inside the West Hills house, time felt slower, steadier, deliberate. The chaos of Christmas had burned itself out, leaving behind the faint scent of smoke and paper. The newspapers had carried the story for 3 days. Elderly man outsmarts family in $850,000 fraud scheme. The title made me chuckle every time I saw it. They called me the greedy old man in the comments section. It was almost poetic. If greed meant refusing to surrender what was mine, I would wear the title proudly. The house was quiet now, but it was the good kind of quiet, the kind that comes after years of noise. I'd boxed up Jennifer's belongings and mailed them to her temporary address. She didn't respond, and I didn't expect her to. The silence between us was its own language. Each morning I woke at 6, brewed strong black coffee, and sat in the study where it had all begun. The mahogany desk, the faded curtains, the portrait of Sarah smiling down. These were my constants. But something new sat there now, a thick binder labeled Sterling Hope Foundation. By the end of January, the foundation was officially registered. My lawyer, Charles, helped me structure it so not a penny could ever fall into Jennifer or David's hands. Every asset they tried to steal was now untouchable, locked away to fund scholarships and housing for single parents. Real people, honest ones. One afternoon, Charles looked across the table at me and said, "You know, Frank, this is one of the most poetic revenge stories I've seen in my career." I smiled. It's not revenge anymore. It's repair. Still, not everything was peace. I received one last letter from Jennifer. Her handwriting had changed, shakier, thinner. "Dad, I know you don't want to hear from me. We lost everything. The house, David's job, our reputation. I don't blame you for what you did. Maybe we needed to fall this low to see what we'd become. I hope one day I can make it right. I miss Mom. I miss you." I read it 3 times. For a long moment, I thought about replying. Then I folded the paper and placed it inside Sarah's jewelry box. Forgiveness, I decided, didn't need to be spoken to. Exist. That evening, as the sun sank behind the city, I lit the fireplace again. Outside, the last of the snow melted off the pines. I poured a small glass of brandy and sat in Sarah's favorite armchair. The news played softly in the background. A young woman, tearful, hopeful, spoke about receiving a first Sterling Hope scholarship. "It means I can finally finish nursing school," she said. "Whoever Mr. Sterling is, I just want to thank him." I smiled to myself. "You're welcome," I whispered. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel old. I didn't feel lonely. I felt useful. Later, I walked to the window. The lights of Portland shimmered below like distant stars. Somewhere out there, my daughter was trying to rebuild her own life. Maybe one day she'd understand that I hadn't destroyed her. I'd freed her from her own greed, just as I'd freed myself. The clock struck 9. I picked up the phone, dialed the foundation's accountant, and confirmed the first round of grants. It felt good, like setting something right in a world that had gone wrong for too long. When I hung up, I looked around the house one last time. Every creak, every framed memory belonged to both the man I'd been and the man I'd become. The greedy old man who refused to die quietly had built something that would outlive them all. I raised my glass towards Sarah's portrait again. "Phase 4, I said softly. "Peace." And as the embers glowed, I finally allowed myself to rest.